to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid-lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast on a Wednesday night. And hey, last week I didn't partake. I was focused on water, but this week I've decided I'm going to drink a little bit of the red breast this evening. And that's just got some really nasty, grainy stuff because of the light. That's odd. I'm going to maybe have to work on that. Okay. But I am not going to drink it out of my usual glass. I am drinking it out of an Mayorkas shot glass. Now, interesting thing about these shot glasses, I used to, travel quite a bit, and, everywhere that I went, I started this tradition, I guess, many, many years ago. And I started this tradition where every place I would go that was brand new, I would pick up a shot glass on my way back home. And so I now have a collection of shot glasses from like all over the place. I mean, it would, obviously this is just a US thing. I tried doing it on my international trips, and that unfortunately did not work out the best because, I mean, amazingly, they're not as interested in shot glasses on outside of like the US. So I have it from a lot of US cities that I've been to. Cities and states. I tried to get some really cool ones. And this one in particular, the Mayorkas one, actually came out of Baltimore, obviously due to the fact that it's next to Washington, D.C. So that trip where I picked up this shot glass, I also had to pick up not only the Mayorkas one for Washington, D.C., but I also picked up one for Baltimore itself. All right. So, I see people are coming into the chat. This is awesome. Thank you very much for joining. So first things first, I have a couple of things. Obviously, the entire media sphere, both on the left and the right, are dealing with the leaked, potentially majority decision by the Supreme Court on possibly overturning Roe versus Wade. And I've got a couple of things on that. I know a lot of people have been talking about it. I know a lot of the pundits have been. It's the biggest topic of the initial week. But I want to make sure that I'm going to try and approach it from a slightly different angle than most. I also had a few things that have popped up just before I came live. And by that, I mean, in the couple of hours between my, between the ending of my day for my paying job and then, of course, coming online for you guys, I found a couple of things that are going to be kind of interesting. I'm going to try and throw them in there. So do not be surprised if tonight goes over a little bit in terms of time, because of the fact I've got a lot to cover, and I'm not bashful about talking, so I might get a little, overzealous with some of my stuff. So I apologize ahead of time. So don't be surprised if I go a little bit over than my usual, hour. However, first things first, I have to, I've got to remember which one's which. Okay. So first things first. We're going to talk about the Institute on the Constitution because this is apropos for today's program. And get yourself a copy, if you get a chance, get yourself a copy of the Constitution of the United States of America from the Institute of the Institute on the Constitution. This particular one is a saddleback leather. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick. It's got rounded corners. It's perfectly sized to fit in a pocket, and it has the stitching. I know I've shown this several times before, but they actually stitch this in. So this thing is going to last for quite some time. And I have to admit that this is buddy tested, buddy approved. Okay. So In regards to that, the Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one mission: to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government, as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, theamericanview.com/# Whiskey Musings. It's in the show notes description to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is theamericanview.com/# Whiskey Musings, all lowercase, all one word, to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's theamericanview.com, all lowercase, all one word as well, / Whiskey Musings. Go check them out today. And I appreciate them for allowing me to be an affiliate with them. So, all right. Now, normally, last week, what I did is I read a poem. And normally I would do something like that. I mean, Saturday nights I read from the American Patriots Almanac. But tonight I'm actually going to read a feel-good story that I picked up through LinkedIn. So if you'll give me just a second to pop that up. All right. So as you all know, if you've been watching this podcast for a little while, I am a big advocate and supporter of not only our military, but also our police and fire, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it turns out that a particular sheriff's office is a supporter of veterans as well. And here's the feel-good story. On Wednesday in Alabama, a Walker County Sheriff's Office deputy came across a man walking down the road with an oxygen tank and learned that he is a disabled American veteran trying to walk/hitchhike from the Jasper area to Huntsville for a doctor's appointment. He was told he could not miss. With no other way to get there, he said he started walking. The deputy acted quickly and escorted the Gulf War veteran to the Coleman County line, where a Coleman sheriff deputy picked him up. That deputy then transported him to the Morgan County line, where a Morgan County sheriff deputy took over and met a Madison County sheriff's officer deputy in Huntsville, who finished the trip and took the man to his appointment. After an overnight stay, we were happy to do it all again today, in reverse, to help get the man back home. So in other words, they went ahead and brought it all, or flipped it all back and came back home. We are thankful for our veterans, and we're honored to play a small role in supporting this man who gave a great deal for our country. And the credit comes, the credit for the photo that's in there comes from the Morgan County Sheriff's Office. And I'm sorry, folks, but I mean, there is absolutely no understanding that anyone can have without realizing that every American veteran, whether they've gone into war or not, when you sign on that dotted line and you say, you raise that hand and you say that I solemnly swear, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but when you stand and you may take that oath of office and you either enlist or become an officer in any of the services, you are essentially writing on a check that basically says this is payable to the U.S. government up to and including your life. And it took me a while. I mean, I served, as Buddy brings out. In fact, let me go ahead and pop that up here just because. So, I served. There was my reasons to serve. And, I didn't serve in a war zone. I did serve during wartime. In fact, the Gulf War was I think the first one maybe, but the point is that, even if you don't serve, you're still in support of those, even if you don't serve in a war zone, you are still serving in support of those who are in the war zone. And again, like I said, when you sign that piece of paper, you're basically saying that you are signing a check over to the U.S. government that is payable up to and including your life. And so because of that, I think that we all need to make sure that if you get a chance to, thank a veteran or something like that, get an opportunity, even those who are serving, who are in uniform. I've done that before where I've been at an airport and I've seen young ones, first recruits that are getting ready to take off and go off to either boot camp or basic training, depending upon, which branch they're in, and go up and just say thank you for doing what they do, for signing up, for volunteering. We in America have the biggest all volunteer army in the world. In terms of the army itself, but even just expanding it to the military, we have an all volunteer military. The draft was gone long ago, and other countries actually require service, like Israel, and I think Sweden requires service and things like that. So, here in the States, it is all volunteer. Everybody that's in there is there for their own reasons, for their own purpose, and so on and so forth. And so that is just absolutely awesome. So hey, Daybreak, thank you very much. I appreciate that. That is a super rant. Thank you. Make sure you back the blue and the veterans. And I do too. I mean, I back the police officers because I'll be honest with you, cops get up every day and they go out and they do a absolute horrible job. It was even horrible prior to, all of this defund the police and hate the police crap. And people just don't understand, what it takes to basically give a life of service. Now, my service time is over. I've pulled out and I am no longer serving the military. But at the same time, I want to make sure that I give back to those who do when I get the opportunity. And there's different things you can do. I mean, unfortunately, most police agencies and things like that, if you're talking about the cops, most police agencies have rules about what kind of gifts they can accept. But I can tell you that, a cup of coffee, paying for maybe a meal or something like that, is not that far out of the way. And most of the time, I would say a good majority of the time, that kind of stuff is allowed. And these men and women, they go out and they do all of these wonderful things for us. And they work weekends, nights, holidays. In terms of the holidays, they're often away from their loved ones and that kind of thing for the holidays, birthdays, things like that. And they work often long hours for relatively little pay in some cases, depending upon where they're at. So if you get the opportunity, definitely do that. And I didn't necessarily mean to get off on that kind of a tangent, but it is important. I mean, it's very important, to recognize the people that have given us the ability to not only live here in America freely, which it would be the soldiers, but also to live here safely, which would be the police officers. And when you need to call for help, for medical help or whatever, you've got the fire department as well. All right. And I see some more things coming in the chat. That's great. I'll get to those in just a few minutes. But first, okay, let's just put it out here. First of all, I'm going to tell you, I do not think that this leak from SCOTUS was accidental. I am fairly sure that it was either planned or definitely was something that somebody may have done and kind of coordinated it. I don't exactly think that this was something that was, just, somebody leaked it accidentally. This was on purpose. And the reason for this, of course, was to motivate the Democrat base. I mean, they've been taking a beating here recently in a lot of issues. You've got their Pino, president in name only, Biden, who is standing up. He's losing on inflation. He's losing on immigration. He's losing voters. All the polls are saying that his approval ratings are down, so on and so forth. So it's just it's a nasty situation all around. But whoever did this leak, honestly, one of the things that has been great about the judicial branch of our government is the fact that they've never really had a leak of this kind of magnitude, as far as I'm aware, in terms of historical significance. This is something that doesn't happen, and that's because of the respect of the institution and the institution itself has a bit of respect and decorum, and this leak is not part of that decorum. Now, I can tell you this much, that this leak was not somebody transmitting like an electronic file to someone. And I'll show you why I say that here in just a minute. This was somebody who actually maybe faxed it or scanned it. They grabbed it and they did it in pictures and images and that kind of stuff, rather than sending an actual electronic file such as a PDF or something along those lines. I might as well just go ahead and show you. So if you look at this, and I actually so Politico was the one that leaked it. I grabbed the link from Politico. Politico had it in images. And I do have the link in the show notes. So if you're interested, you can go grab it in the show notes. You can go to my Rumble page and grab it in the show notes there. You can go to YouTube, whatever, and grab it that way. But let me just show you this. So I want this one. Okay. So if you take a look at this, you'll see something that potentially see something. I mean, first of all, the typeface is grainy and everything else. And that was from the original scan. But the scan itself is kind of angled slightly. If you look, like the 64 and the N in organization, they are not in line with one another on a regular basis. So this document was actually either scanned in hurriedly or faxed in to Politico to get this. So they did this via a method that is probably pretty outdated right now. But one of the things that I think a lot of people need to understand about this, and I'll be honest, I've been avoiding this topic. I've tried to avoid it in a lot of cases because it is so politically charged. It is, personally charged. There are a lot of people who are believing in the rhetoric and the hype. They are buying into what the left is selling. And so I honestly have been specifically avoiding it just for that reason, because I mean, let's face it, you can't argue with someone who is going to be so focused and so on their viewpoints and not open to listening to alternative facts and viewpoints and perceptions, in order to try and change their thought process. These people who have bought into this whole thing have, in terms of abortion, it is a very divisive issue in our country, and it has been since Roe was passed in 1973, and even honestly before then. That being said, though, if you get an opportunity, it's a bit of a piece to read, but you should really go to that link and pull down the initial draft, because I got to tell you, Justice Alito outlines the case for overturning in a very methodical, deliberate manner, and brings up a lot of the points that I'm going to be bringing up, but he's doing it literally from the authority of a Supreme Court justice. And ultimately, when you look at the end, and I'm going to bring this up because I highlighted this, this is part of the conclusion portion of the opinion. And he basically states here in the highlighted section, he says, "We do not pretend to know how our political system or society will respond to today's decision overruling Roe and Casey. And even if we could foresee what will happen, we will have no authority to let that knowledge influence our decision. We can only do our job, which is to interpret the law, apply long-standing principles of stare decisis, and decide this case accordingly. We therefore hold that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey must be overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion must be returned to the people and their elected representatives." Now, let me talk a little bit about that, because honestly, this is the crux of the issue. This is the crux of the case. And whenever this topic has come up and I have, decided to render my opinion on it, the fact of the matter is this: there is nothing in this written document, the Constitution of the United States, there is nothing in here that guarantees anyone the right to health care or subsequently the right to an abortion. There is nothing in here that specifically states that. In fact, the one amendment that would classify us in this spot would be the 10th Amendment. And Buddy already got to it ahead of me. So in the chat, in the Rumble chat. So the one thing that does potentially apply is the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment reads, and I quote, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." And the fact of the matter is that 10th Amendment is supposed to rein in a lot of what we've seen in terms of federal government overreach. I've talked about it on this show many, many times. The 10th Amendment clearly states that if it isn't already in the Constitution as a specific power of the federal government, nor is it specifically stating that it's not a power of the federal government or the states, then it belongs to the states. And Roe versus Wade in the initial should have gone that way, period. There is absolutely nothing that you could say that precludes this, because of the fact that the Constitution of the United States literally states that piece. There is no concept of what abortion is or isn't. And if you look at the Roe v. Wade decision, okay, and the way it was brought about, you'll see that unfortunately the justices basically turned into activists, and they allowed their outside feelings and emotions to rule, which Justice Alito actually points out in this opinion. This is part of the reason why this is so on point with the constitutionality and the way that our government works. It is so on point. I can't even tell you, but I'm going to bring something up here in just a little bit from the Federalist Papers. And again, I have the book, the Federalist Papers. These are the de facto side source, I guess. If you want to understand the Constitution and understand the arguments, you have to read the Federalist Papers. You have to read the Anti-Federalist Papers. That is the only way for you to fully understand both the context and the situations that they were dealing with in terms of arguing back and forth about all the points of the Constitution. Now, a little bit further down in the, and I'm going to bring it back up again. So a little bit further down in the opinion, Alito also talks about exactly this problem. Okay, so he says, we end this opinion where we began. Abortion presents a profound moral question. And honestly, in side note, that is absolutely correct. That is so on point. He continues. The Constitution does not prohibit the citizens of each state from regulating or prohibiting abortion. Okay, side note, this is where the left gets it wrong. All right, now, going back to his quote, Roe and Casey arrogated that authority. In other words, what he's saying with that statement about Roe and Casey, he's basically saying that the decisions made overruled or took over the authority of the states from either regulating or prohibiting abortion. Now, continue with this statement. We now overrule those decisions and return that authority to the people and their elected representatives. The judgment of the Fifth Circuit Court is reversed and the case is remanded for further proceedings consistent with this opinion. Okay, folks, that statement right there basically brings it out 100%. Okay, that is the whole crux of this issue. The whole crux of this issue is seriously regarding the moral question. Abortion by itself is a moral, a ethical, and honestly, a religious, which kind of wraps up in the moral and ethical questions. But it is not ever the place of government to argue back and forth about those moral questions. And that's why the 10th Amendment was put in there, was to prevent government overreach from doing something, especially on the federal level, that is not enumerated nor prohibited by the Constitution of the United States from either the states or the people. And this is the way that it was before Roe versus Wade in 1973. Some states had abortion as being legal, like California and New York will still have after this, if provided this decision goes the way that we think it will, with like a 5-4 split decision. Okay. There is no doubt at all that this should be a states' rights issue. This should be decided by the states. Does it eliminate abortion completely? No. And the left is totally wrong in this. All this does, and by the way, it also doesn't prevent taxes being utilized to fund abortions either. All this decision does is basically say the decision has to be made by the elected representatives, okay, and or the people in terms of their vote. All right? That's all this says. That is all this decision is going to do. It basically removes the court overreach from 1973's Roe versus Wade and 1992's Casey versus Planned Parenthood, or Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And it corrects those two incorrect rulings. And it's not like this is the first time the court has done this. I mean, the court has done this on multiple occasions. You can go back and look up, Dred Scott. You can look up Brown versus the Board of Education. I mean, all of these decisions, and there's several others. And, Alito even says it in his in the opinion, he talks about those cases, and he basically says that just because they've been ruled on doesn't mean that they are no longer, that they're set in stone, that they can't get overturned later. The other thing that the left has been doing a lot of is they're saying, well, if we're going to overturn Roe v. Wade and ban abortion, where does it stop? Does it, do we do same-sex marriage? Do we do all of these other things? And the fact of the matter is, no. Actually, Alito, again, he wrote this in just an incredibly elegant fashion. And he even calls that out in his text. He even says, this is just for this ruling and this ruling alone. It has nothing to do with any of those other, other situations, whatever it is. All right. But this is where the left gets it wrong. And this is where the left doesn't understand. They only go for essentially surface level knowledge. This is all they care about, is whatever is on the surface, whatever parroting talking points, their talking heads on CNN, MSNBC, all of those people. Okay. They look at stuff like this and they think, oh my God, this is going to change everything. And in reality, when you start digging into it, when you start getting the depth of knowledge, the breadth of knowledge, and the understanding of not only the context, but the situational aspects of all of this, you start to realize that all this is doing is just realistically rescinding an overreach of the Judiciary Committee or the judiciary branch that it never should have had in the first place. And towards that end, excuse me, sorry. Give me just a second here. I'll close it. Okay. Towards that end, I want to bring up the Federalist Papers. Okay. So here in the Federalist Papers, all right, this is, for those of you that don't remember, it's James Madison wrote in the paper called the Federalist several missives. And we're talking, I can't remember the exact number, but I know it's like almost close to 100, if not above 100. But several missives within the papers as the Constitution was being written and argued at the convention. He sends out arguments basically in printed word, which we have now used as sort of the basis to understand a lot of the parts and pieces of the Constitution of the United States. And in response to that, you got responses in the anti-Federalist papers. So there was a written record through the paper system that went back and forth about the different parts and pieces and points and paragraphs and even wording back and forth about the writing of the Constitution at the time. In particular, when it came to Article 3, which is where the judiciary branch is built, James Madison wrote Federalist Paper number 78 through 83 in specific against or talking about the Article 3 in the judiciary and how it should be put together and everything else. What I've done for you here is I've grabbed the Federalist number 78 from the Avalon project. I've got the text. I've got the link in the description. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring this up and let's shut that off and bring this guy up. Okay. So I apologize. I can't get it any larger. If I do, it's going to zoom in pretty bad, but here we go with the first highlighted part, and I'm going to read it to you and then interpret it because, again, it is in Old English, 17th, 18th century English language, which if anybody's read Shakespeare, it's kind of hard to understand. Okay, this simple view of the matter suggests several important consequences. It proves incontestably that the judiciary is beyond comparison the weakest of the three departments of power, that it can never attack with success either of the other two, and that all possible care is requisite to enable it to defend itself against their attacks. It equally proves that although individual oppression may now and then proceed from the courts of justice, the general liberty of the people can never be endangered from that quarter. I mean, so long as the judiciary remains truly distinct from both the legislative and the executive. Now, what does he mean by that? So, first of all, he basically says, literally, that the judiciary is the weakest of the three branches. And, you know, we learned in school, you learn this whole separate but equal idea. But in reality, the thought process from James Madison is that the judiciary is actually the weakest of the three. It is not at the same level of power as, say, the executive or the legislative branch. And in actuality, the legislative branch, because it was pushed by the people, okay, because it was elected representatives that were both at the time the Senate from all of the state legislatures and the House of Representatives being elected directly by the people, which the senators actually changed over, but they felt that the legislative body was actually the most powerful of the three branches of government. Now, what he is talking about here is that the judiciary is the weakest, and it can't attack the other two. In other words, what he's saying is you cannot have the judiciary, as the maker of laws. They interpret laws. They don't make laws. Okay. Now he further comes down and he talks about this. This is the second highlighted piece. The complete independence of the courts of justice is peculiarly essential in a limited constitution. By a limited constitution, I understand one which contains certain specified exceptions to legislative authority, such, for instance, as it shall pass no bills of attainder, no ex post facto laws, and the like. So he basically outlines and says the judiciary only interprets. They cannot create their own laws. They cannot create things out of nothing. And if you grab that piece and you look into what Justice Alito is talking about, he actually brings that up. In Roe v. Wade, in particular, they came up with this whole trimester idea. And essentially, by rendering that opinion and writing it in the way that they did, they essentially created an ex post facto law out of a legal opinion. Okay. Let me see. Okay. So I also highlighted this, and this is something else that Alito refers to in his opinion. He says the court, okay, the Federalist paper says the courts must declare the sense of the law, and if they should be disposed to exercise will instead of judgment, the consequence would equally be the substitution of their pleasure to that of the legislative body. So it's, in a sense, what he's saying here is basically that if the court decides to impose their will, in other words, if it becomes political and imports what they think is right, rather than just rendering judgment over the facts of the case, then they essentially turn into a legislative body, which is not the intent at all of the judiciary branch. The judiciary branch is to interpret laws and to focus on the Constitution, whether it's at the state level or at the federal level, to determine whether or not that law is a proper law based on the information that's outlined in those constitutions, in the constitutional bodies, and whether or not the law runs afoul of the Constitution. Or in some cases, he actually even mentioned, as I didn't highlight this, but where you have two statutes that say essentially the same thing, It is the judiciary's responsibility to determine the validity of either one over the other, or trying to whether or not they need to be eliminated both, or whether one can take place, and that kind of stuff. The judiciary is not in any way, shape, or form supposed to be a legislative body. And, you know, a lot of arguments they talked about, in fact, here, he makes this argument. So a lot of people talk about, you know, we need to have a court that isn't made up of, in terms of the Supreme Court, made up of judges that are lifetime appointments. That's wrong. That is totally wrong, and so on and so forth. So take a look at this. So he says, and this is Madison again in the Federalist paper 78, that inflexible and uniform adherence to the rights of the Constitution and of individuals, which we perceive to be indispensable in the courts of justice, can certainly not be expected from judges who hold their offices by a temporary commission. In other words, those that are only there for part-time. Periodical appointments, however regulated, or by whomsoever made, would in some way or other be fatal to their necessary independence. So what he's stating here is that the reason that they get lifetime appointments, and the reason that they go through the process by which they get confirmed, all of that, the reason why they're there is to make sure that they are not influenced outside by either the other elected representatives or pressure from the people. He's basically stating within this that and there's further talk about this, but I only highlighted this line. There's only one reason why they are there, and that is to interpret the Constitution without prejudice, without influence from any outside sources. And that's what Alito was referring to, where he says, look, we don't know what the public is going to look at this for. We don't know what they're going to do. And frankly, it's not our job. Our job, and he rightfully so says this, our job is to interpret the Constitution and to interpret it as it relates to this particular case. The fact of the matter is, in terms of the case of Roe v. Wade and of Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that was an overreach by the judiciary body and never should have been put into place. The federal government has absolutely zero business in determining whether or not abortion should be legal or illegal, because it is not enumerated in the Constitution. And based on the 10th Amendment, it should be remanded to the states or to the people. In other words, the people's elected representatives in Congress. If they want to make a law about it, that's entirely up to them. And the thing about it is that a lot of people don't understand is there's a specific reason why Congress has not taken this up. They haven't taken it up because they understand and they know, regardless of what all the political pundits on the left are saying, not a lot of people support abortion in terms of, you know, the essential murder of a human life. We in America have this belief in terms of the sanctity of human life. And so the argument has to go back and forth in terms of what is a human life? Where, you know, when does human existence come into play? And then you have to have the moral and argument about, you know, at what point do they gain rights? You know, do we speak up for the unborn? Those kinds of issues should be debated in an open and public forum. I know where I sit. Okay. I know where I sit. But the reality of it is not everybody is going to think like I do, and I don't expect them to. But we need to understand that this needs to be debated and settled in an open public forum in a calm and rational manner with certain things outlined specifically, and that we cannot expect 50 states to all fall within the same characteristics and values. This is part of the reason why we are 50 united states. We are united under one banner, but that doesn't mean that each individual state, as our Constitution and government was set up, cannot have its own set of laws and its own set of values and everything else. Now, Ben Shapiro actually talks about this, and he brings up the point that, this is just going to further divide the country. It's going to turn blue states bluer, red states redder. And there is a good possibility that that's going to happen. I mean, this is a very divisive issue. But the fact of the matter is, regardless of what the left says, if you want to get an abortion, you'll still be able to get an abortion. You may just have to go to another state to do so, should some states decide to ban it outright. Okay. Enough on that. Now, give me just a second here. All right. Now, another decision got rendered. Another decision got rendered on Monday that got totally blasted and covered up because of this, this leak, okay, and the story that taken over. Now, this has to deal also with, in a tangential kind of way, with religion and free speech. But it's not specifically about religion. It's more about free speech, and especially the government, in the government body, and their overreach in terms of free speech. So check this out. I saw this and I was thinking about this. And then we ended up with the whole abortion thing. But I saw this and was incredibly. Now wait a minute. I got to find it here. Nope, not that one. Okay. Where the heck did it go? Here we go. So the city of Boston has has in the front of its city hall has 3 flagpoles. The one flagpole flies the American flag with the POW flag below it. The secondary flagpole flies the state flag. And the third flagpole, the city decided, or the city council, whoever's in charge, mayor, whatever, they decided that it would be kind of neat to have different groups petition to fly a flag on that pole. Now, this was way back in 2016, 2017 when this happened, okay? But the city of Boston had something like 280, I don't specifically remember the number, but it was over 200 organizations and groups and so on and so forth that have flown a flag on that flagpole. And these groups have included things like the Chinese Communist flag, the Turkish flag, the Gay Pride flag. The Battle of Bunker Hill had a flag on it at one point. And so every single one of these flags was essentially approved. They have, as far as I know, they have never denied someone from putting up their flag. And this is over 200 times, 250 times that this has happened. Until a Christian-based group came up and asked to fly the Christian flag. Now, the Christian flag, for those of you that don't know, is primarily white with a corner kind of like our stars would be in, but it has a blue background and a red cross on it. Honestly, if you really didn't know what that flag was, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. I fly one on Easter and Christmas Day. And the reason I do is because of my religious beliefs. And I put mine up on the flagpole. It is the 2 times of year that the American flag does not fly. And, so if you weren't even aware of what that flag was, you probably wouldn't even notice or care. But Boston decided, the city of Boston decided that that flag might be construed as the city basically the city advocating for a Christian religion. Now, I don't know if any other faith-based organizations were there, had flown their flag, because none of it was listed. But then again, I didn't look through all 200 plus flags that had been flown. However, the idea here was the fact that because it was Christian, they went ahead and said, yeah, we're not going to do it. No, sorry, you cannot fly that flag, because of the fact that we feel like that means that the government and the idea of the establishment clause in the First Amendment, dealing with the establishment of a religion, that it would be against that and they would get into trouble for it. Completely understandable. I mean, you know, there's people out there who have this issue with the establishment clause and so on and so forth. However, this case went up all the way through, obviously, to the Supreme Court. Now, here's the interesting part of all of this. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously, as you can see in the article, a 9-0 decision, and the decision was written, even though some of the other justices wrote consenting opinions, but the deciding opinion was written by none other than Justice Breyer, who we know is far left. And here's the case that was made, is that opening up the flagpole to allow other organizations to put their flag up constituted creating what would be considered a public forum. And Justice Breyer stated that basically by doing so, they eliminated the idea of the establishment of religion. And so therefore, what they ended up doing is by discriminating against this organization, by saying they couldn't fly the flag, they actually trampled on that group's free speech rights within the public space. And the definition actually, or the ruling actually also stated that the government does have its right to hold its own opinion. And if it hadn't gone and opened up that flagpole to all of these organizations to basically petition or apply, or whatever phrase you want to use, if the city government had not gone and done that, then they would have been in the right to refuse, because of the fact that at that point it wasn't a public forum. But because they went and opened it up to everybody, they couldn't discriminate against the Christian flag being flown and allowing all these other flags to be flown. Now, this is kind of an interesting point when you look at this, because of the fact that when you think about the establishment clause, and this is where a lot of people get it wrong, there is an idea out in the public sphere that there is a concept or idea of the separation of church and state, and that this concept exists in the Constitution. That concept doesn't exist. It is a fallacy. It is another thing that the left has glammed on, it grabbed onto, and has thrown into the face of anyone who is a Christian conservative. The Establishment Clause essentially states that the government itself cannot establish a religion. And if you look at the historical context, this has everything to do with the King of England creating the Church of England, because the people that came across over here to the what was the New World, they were Quakers, Puritans. I can't even think of all the different religious groups that came over here. They were looking for the freedom to practice each of their religions. But it had the Establishment Clause had nothing to do with the fact that the government itself, the government itself had to prevent religion in government spaces. In fact, if you look at traditions such as the when they bring Congress in to start their next sessions, they have a prayer. Now, originally it was just, Judeo-Christian organizations that were invited to come and give the prayer. But as of recent years, it's been expanded to include other faiths. But the fact of the matter is that we need to understand that government can recognize religion and can actually have religion as a part of its decorum. They just cannot establish a religion. And this is where the fallacy comes into play, because the government is not allowed to create a religion or force people to be part of a religion, a specific religion, but they can embrace religions. Okay? Now, in terms of the flag, and Buddy actually brings up a really good point, and I'm going to pop this up. So he states that means this order means that somebody could fly a Nazi flag too, something to consider. And he's right. And this falls into that whole free speech thing, is that free speech, even speech that you don't like, has to be allowed in order to allow the concept of free speech. Now, I don't know if this is something that they were thinking about, Justice Breyer and the rest were thinking about. However, that's a result of something like this, some kind of scenario like this. Now, it's interesting that we have two cases that popped up, both of which are dealing with the Constitution, and both of them, realistically, they got it right on both of them. So, as far as having faith in the Supreme Court, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if this Supreme Court decision in terms of the abortion decision actually carries forward and isn't influenced because of this leak, which there's indications that this is exactly why they did the leak. In order to try and influence the court, which again goes against the concept of the Constitution. But the reality of it is that if the court does overturn Roe v. Wade, all it is doing is correcting a long time and egregious error that was made by an activist court. And this is part of the reason why picking justices is so important. And Trump's ability to where he picked the justices, he specifically stated in one of the debates, I think, he specifically stated that he was going to pick justices who would be essentially pro-life. Now, you could take that for what you want. I would rather have justices who are strict adherers, who have a strict adherence, I should say, to the Constitution. And that, honestly, I don't really care if they're pro-life or pro-choice. That part doesn't matter. As long as they follow and interpret the Constitution as it was properly written and interpreted, not by this, abstract view of like the 1619 Project. I want them to focus on this and really understand that this was never a decision that should have been made in the Supreme Court. As bad as that sounds, to those who are out there in pro-life land, pro-abortion land, I'm sorry. So we're cautiously thinking that this might be an issue. But Dan Bongino today brought up a good point, and I certainly hope that this is the case, that the Supreme Court justices have beefed up security, because leaking this information has now put all of them, honestly, at risk. But in particular, the 4 or 5 justices that are assumed to be conservative on the bench. This is going to put their lives in complete danger. And this is a problem. This is totally a problem. So I certainly hope we're going to have to watch over the next few days. But the left has gone totally nuts. And we've seen the videos, we've seen that the wailing, the people outside the court, they've been cussing at each other. They've been taking on all kinds of, now granted, as a conservative looking at someone like the Patriot Manifesto talks about, the Patriot Manifesto does say that when the left is happy, we shouldn't be. And I, of course, have flipped that around and said, if they aren't happy, we should be. So I'm kind of happy right now, not because of the fact that I believe or don't believe in abortion, but because of the fact that I definitely believe in the Constitution and I definitely believe in the strict interpretation thereof. However, that being said, these people have gone kind of crazy. And if you recall, and this is probably going to get me kicked off of YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, I would highly suggest you move over to Rumble. Rumble is my preferred platform. It is the free speech alternative to YouTube. Please come and subscribe there. I'm only going to point that out just because of the fact that this next thing is probably going to get me kicked off. Do you remember when the left was going off on taking horse medicine for COVID? They were calling ivermectin horse medicine, which it is. It is horse wormer. I own horses. I worm them. That is true. But this popped up, and I got this from the Post Millennial. I did not link it in the show notes because it came in just as I was getting ready to go on, and I wanted to get it up here because it's just, the hypocrisy of the left is incredible. The hypocrisy of the left and what they do is sometimes even mind-blowing for me. But this popped up, and I'm just going to share this with you. Let me go up here to this one. See, this is the problem with being a one-man show. I don't have enough hands to actually do what I need to do. But this is a tweet that was thrown out talking about misoprostol. Misoprostol. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I am not a doctor. Latin is not my strong suit. But check this out. This was Motherboard putting this out, and actually Vice.com was the one that started the whole article, but they wrote an article that started talking about do-it-yourself, DIY abortion medicine. And this Motherboard came out and said, misoprostol is relatively easy to acquire from veterinary sources, since in addition to medically inducing abortions, it's also used to treat ulcers in horses. So, hey, Twitter, leftist, Facebook, this is misinformation. This is people who are trying to grab a medicine and use it off-label in humans. I'm fairly certain this is not human approved, unlike ivermectin was. Okay. Because of the fact that they are saying that you can get it from veterinary sources. So, hey, you know what? Have at it, guys. Have at it. Go ahead and do this. But don't sit here and complain about the fact that we were talking about HCQ and IVM to treat COVID back in the day. And like I said, YouTube's probably going to give me a strike for this. It'll be my second one, whatever. Anyway, moving on. All right. Now, the last thing that I'm going to talk about tonight. Okay. Last Saturday, I talked about it. I talked about it before that, the Wednesday, a week ago. And of course, everybody has been up in arms about Twitter. And then all of a sudden, the DHS secretary came out last Friday and basically says, hey, we've already formed a disinformation board. And of course, the right jumped on it and started talking about the Ministry of Truth, which is out of the book 1984 by George Orwell. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the book or haven't read the book, the Ministry of Truth basically takes everything written, video evidence, all of it, and they massage it and turn it into whatever is appropriate for the current particular stance. So I use the example that Oceania, which is where 1984 is set, is always at war, but they're sometimes at war with East Asia, sometimes at war with Eurasia. And in the book, there is a particular point in time where they actually switch from one to the other. And so the main character of the book has to, as a part of his job, has to go through all of the newspaper clippings, all the books, everything that was printed, prior to this switch, and turn everything around. And the entire populace is basically sitting here and going, sitting here and going, well, now we've always been at war with whoever the other one was. I think it was Eurasia in the beginning of the book and East Asia at the last. But they've always been at war with this. The past never mattered. So as a part of this, the DHS secretary, and by the way, I want to say hello because Justice Jan just came in from YouTube and just said hello. I want to say hello to them. The DHS secretary created this disinformation board and, brought in who was going to lead the disinformation board. And the person who was going to lead is Nina Jankowicz. I think I pronounced that correctly. But she is supposed to lead the newly created Disinformation Governance Board. And of course, the people started digging into her background and started coming up with all kinds of information about her and what she was doing. And a couple of things that came out are videos of her singing. One of them in regards to sexual topics, but the other one that seems to be making the rounds has to deal with her modification of a Mary Poppins song. I think it's the Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious song, but anyway, and she modified the lyrics and was speaking in particular about Rudy Giuliani and the Hunter Biden laptop, how she didn't believe in either one of them, that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, which we now know is not true. It is verified that the laptop is Hunter's, and it is verified that a lot of the emails that have come from it are also Hunter's, or in communique between Hunter and other people. We know this for a fact, people. Okay. It's out there. It's been put out there. Anyway, if you have any questions on that, I discuss it in a couple of my other videos, so you can go back and watch those. But she claims that none of that was true. She claims all of that was Russian disinformation, that Rudy Giuliani's information was also false, and that kind of stuff. Well, I saw this headline pop up from the Epoch Times, and let me go ahead and bring this up, which I thought was very apropos to the situation. The DHS secretary says, and this is Alejandro Mayorkas, says that he wasn't aware of the disinformation board leader's background. Okay. You mean to tell me that you are interviewing an individual to head up essentially a very, very strategically placed regulatory body, and you didn't bother doing a background check on this person? I mean, I know companies that have dug through people's lives. They've pulled up tweets from 20, 30 years ago. I mean, you look at anybody in the news media, they have all dug into these people's lives and brought them up and have gotten people fired because of these things. And you mean to tell me, Secretary Mayorkas, that you didn't know? I mean, how ridiculous does that sound? Honestly, how ridiculous does that sound? To have a person put in charge of a potentially unconstitutional, and I only say potentially because I know that it is actually unconstitutional. It just hasn't been challenged yet, but a potentially unconstitutional regulatory body. And you were sitting here and telling me that you didn't know about her background. And he also talks about how she is uniquely qualified for that position. I'd like to know where he got the idea that that she was uniquely qualified for that position. So anyway, that is my final Whiskey Musings thought. Wow, I actually got it in a much less time than I thought I would. Do me a favor. If you like the show, please go ahead and go to my Rumble account and subscribe, because who knows how long I'm going to be able to stay on YouTube and Facebook. I've been suspended from Twitter, and honestly, I mean, I've been trying to get it back, but whatever. So do go to my Rumble account and subscribe. There's a great group of people over there. I am so thankful that they have come in and joined and watched me and support the show. Also, once you've done the subscription side of the house, if you could also do me a favor and spread the word. I'd like to expand my base. I want to get my viewership up, and I can only ask of you to go ahead and do that. Because to be honest with you, I'm not really much of a marketer. That's not my marketing kind of thing. And if you want to support the show, so there's a couple different ways, and I'm going to show you this right now. So one of these is to actually go to Rumble, sign in or get a subscription, and then you can send me super rants like this one from Daybreak, who basically says, "Great show. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Daybreak. As always, very, very happy to see you here." The other way you can do it is use my affiliates. I talked about the affiliate link of the Institute on the Constitution. I have all of my affiliate links in the show notes and descriptions. I also have a store that has Whiskey Musings logoed gear. Things like sweatshirts, t-shirts. For the ladies, I've got jogger pants and ladies shirts and tank tops for people. I also have mugs and stickers. The store does take a while to create it because I don't have a stock of it. It is order, create when ordered kind of thing. So don't be surprised if it takes a while. But I definitely appreciate that if you do go and decide to go to the store and, find something. I know a couple people who have already gotten it. I know several people who have said that the sweatshirts are great. I've got a rousing endorsement for the Gators from one of my other longtime fans and listeners. So, just do me a favor. If you want to support the show, if you want to support what I do, please go ahead and do that. I always feel bad about, just taking money in terms of the rants. But at the same time, I like to try and give things back. So, but I am very appreciative of all of my fans because you take time out of your day to come and listen to what I have to say. And this is just fabulous. I like what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a little over 2 years now. I like what I'm doing. I want to expand it. This is absolutely awesome. All right. Now, one other thing. I also have at the store, I do have a tagline. You'll hear it in the beginning. It says, "When I drink, I think," or in this particular case, my announcer says, "When he drinks, he thinks." That's a tagline that I came up with. And that tagline actually means that when I sit and I drink my whiskey, okay, I actually think about all these topics. I think about things. I do deep thinking, and I really get into it when I sit outside next to a campfire, when it's really quiet out in the night. My favorite time of year is in the winter. So I love sitting by a campfire in the winter with snow on the ground. And that is just, to me, that is when I do my best thinking. And so when I drink, I think, and that's my tagline. And I appreciate all of you coming here and sharing that time with me, like tonight. I live stream Wednesday and Saturday. Wednesday is 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Saturday is 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you Saturday. Hopefully, we'll see you Saturday on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night, everybody.